Hey, good morning, my relatives. This is Mark Charles. I'm sitting down this morning to drink my second cup of coffee, and I wanted to just discuss a few things going on this week and look at some things happening over the next few days. So I'm not expecting this will be a long live stream, but I wanted to jump on and just share a few thoughts. Before I begin, as I always do, let me start by acknowledging I'm speaking to you from the lands of the Piscataway. And it's now known as Washington, D.C., but I want to thank and honor the Piscataway as the host people of these lands and just publicly state how humbled I am to be living on these lands today. So there's a few things I wanted to just share with you, a few stories that I'm following right now. And the first is, if you haven't seen it yet, there has been a pretty bad oil spill in California. It's right off of the Pacific coast, and it's right near Huntington Beach. That's actually a beach I would go to pretty frequently when I lived in Southern California. It's a beautiful area. And there was a pretty large oil spill, about 126,000 gallons of oil spilled beginning Saturday morning. They finally got the spill stopped, I think sometime yesterday, but it has a massive oil slick out now that has begun to not only destroy some of the wetlands and get some of the wildlife entrapped in it, but it's also now hitting the beaches. And so, again, this just is another challenge we face as a nation, as a world, with oil drilling, especially offshore oil drilling like this, and especially near such necessary wildlife and land and even beaches like it is in Southern California. And so I wanted to share that story with you. It's something that we're tracking. Obviously, there's now going to be a lot of uproar about what to do about oil drilling. There's going to be calls for this drilling to be shut down. I think that's absolutely true. It needs to happen. But I'm very sad that we have another catastrophe like this on our hands now. Especially there's apparently was some wetlands that they've been working on over a decade to restore them and try to get some of the natural habitat back into those wetlands. And in basically 48 hours, 36 hours, all of that restoration has been wiped out due to this oil spill. And the cleanup is ongoing. They've still closed the beaches, and it's another environmental mess right now. So that's one thing I'm going to be watching this week. The second, and I mentioned this when I did my sunrise video on Saturday, but the event that I'm speaking at in New Mexico, the white nationalism and the religious right event, has changed. I got a notification late Friday that this was going to be an in-person event beginning on October 12th and 13th. And now it is going to be an online event. Apparently, they're still going to have a dinner on October 12th, but all of the speaking, all of the webinars, all of those things will be online. And it hasn't specified the date yet. So I have not heard from the organizers. I got the email saying it will be 100% virtual, and we're going to be doing the webinars over a live stream or over video, but I have not heard the schedule yet of if it's going to be on the 13th or if they're going to spread it out now. So hopefully they can get more people to attend each webinar. I'm not sure what's going to happen, but I put a link to that in there. That's one place where you can check back for updates on what's changing and what's going to be happening. And if you'd like to attend it virtually, they do have the option to buy tickets, and you can see all of the webinars once they are available online. So anyway, that's me coming up. I'm a little disappointed. I'm disappointed because I was looking forward to doing an in-person event, and it was going to be fun to be on stage in front of a live audience. I was looking forward to speaking. Lisa Sharon Harper, a woman, a friend of mine who I know, was going to be there as well speaking, and I was looking forward to seeing her and just meeting with some of the organizers. But unfortunately, that's all not going to be happening. I will not be flying out to Albuquerque. It's also a bummer because I was looking forward to going back to seeing my parents and spending some time with family who live in New Mexico, and of course going back to the Navajo Nation in the Four Corners area and seeing family and friends out there. So I will be rescheduling that trip. I'm not sure exactly when, but yeah, that was disappointing. I won't be able to get back to the Navajo Nation this month like I had hoped I was going to be. The next thing I wanted to talk about briefly, and this is just, again, this has been happening throughout the Trump presidency and even now, especially since he's left office. But we get all of these tell-all books, correct? And Stephanie Grisham has the latest. She was the press secretary. She was part of the administration for the entire 4 years. She left after the January 6th white nationalism terrorist attack on our Capitol. But now she's coming out with a tell-all book titled, "I'll Take Your Questions, What I Saw at the Trump White House." And I've read some of the articles about the book. I've read about some of the interviews that she's done. Apparently, she did one with George Stephanopoulos on Good Morning America today, where she talked about the regret she has of working in the Trump White House. And she made an interesting comment where she said the moment, because she worked for Melania Trump for the first part of the administration, and then she moved over to press secretary in the second part of the administration. And she talked about when she got into the White House, she immediately regretted going there. I don't know if she meant into Melania or into the Trump portion of the West Wing, but she talked about her regret. But again, it's fascinating, right? She didn't leave. She stayed on until almost the end of the administration, when things got incredibly chaotic. And so here's another article by Business Insider, which talks some about the interview she had with George Stephanopoulos. And on one hand, it sounds like she had a real change of heart at the end. She did leave before the entire thing was over. But now she's trying to profit greatly by writing this book. And I actually wouldn't mind reading this book. However, I'm not going to buy it. If anything, I'll wait till it gets into a local library and check it out that way. Primarily because I don't want to do anything to directly enrich her and help her to profit off of the 4 years of chaos that she helped create. And so I do not want to reward her or any of these other ex-Trump staffers who are now beginning to see the error of their ways, but are trying to profit from it as their careers are essentially over. And so, yeah, I don't encourage anyone to purchase this book, but it probably will be a good one to read. But I'm going to wait until I can get it in a library, so I don't have to directly pay for it, and won't be putting any money directly into her pocket. Obviously, the library will have to purchase the book, but it's one book that I'm sure several hundred people will read, so I'll be giving her a few pennies, if anything. But anyway, that's just one of the things that I'm kind of pondering. And then the last thing I want to talk about today is an article I read by Andrew Yang. And this is, it was in Politico. It came out over the weekend. And I'm going to put the link into the comments. It's an interesting article. But it talks about, it's titled, "When I Ran for President, It Messed with My Head." And it's kind of Andrew Yang reflecting on the process of running for president and what that did to him emotionally and psychologically. And it's a fairly good and even honest article. Obviously, there's a few other questions I'd love to pose to him, because he's kept himself in that world very much, with running for mayor of New York and now starting a new political party and writing all these books and going on these tours. But anyway, he had some very interesting observations in here. And he starts the article by kind of thinking about, imagine if you went to a birthday party, your own birthday party, and there were people there, all your friends and friends of friends, and it was a large gathering. and everyone was excited to see you, and they were treating you like it was a really special day for you, which it was. They asked you to give a speech, and they hung on your every word. They applauded and they clapped and they congratulated you, and this would be a really good birthday party. And then he said, imagine that happened to you several times a day, every day for a year and a half or 2 years. And that's what running for president is like. And he talks about how running for president absolutely just feeds your ego. And he even goes in to discuss how even psychologists identify that it is very damaging for people to be surrounded by that kind of adoration, and to be that centered, and to be that much in the middle of everything. And I want to share a few thoughts about this from the end of the article, and I'm going to read a few paragraphs here. But it says, the historian Henry Adams described power as a sort of tumor that ends by killing the victim's sympathies. This may sound like hyperbole, but it has been borne out by years of lab and field experiments. Drucker Keltner, a psychologist professor at UC Berkeley, has been studying the influence of power on individuals. He puts people in positions of power relative to each other in different settings. He has consistently found that power over time makes one more impulsive, more reckless, and less able to see things from others' point of view. It also leads one to be rude, more likely to cheat on one's spouse, less attentive to other people, and less interested in the experiences of others. This is Andrew Yang writing, right? He says, does that sound familiar? It turns out that power actually gives you brain damage. He goes on to say, Lord David Owen and Jonathan Davidson called it the hubris syndrome, a disorder of the possession of power held over years and with minimal constraint on the leader. Its clinical features include contempt for others, loss of reality, recklessness, and displays of incompetence. Lack of empathy is also part of the package. The article goes on to say, Andrew says, that Susan Fiske, a Princeton psychologist professor, has argued that this change in attitudes is adaptive and meant to aid efficiency. If you become powerful, you have less need to read other people because you have command of resources. The need to demonstrate empathy is behind you. And then he reflects on the campaign. He says, on the campaign trail, I could clearly see how politicians became susceptible to growing out of touch. You spend time with dozens of people whose schedules and actions revolve around you. Everyone asks what you think. You function on appearance. Appearance becomes your role. Empathy becomes optional or even unhelpful. Leadership becomes the appearance of leadership. He concludes by saying the process through which we choose leaders neutralizes and reduces the capacities we want most in them. It's cumulative as well. The longer you are in it, the more extreme the effects are likely to be over you. I've found this article really accurate, I think. And Andrew Yang follows me on Twitter. I've never heard from him personally, but he does follow me. So I DM'd him today, and I thanked him for writing this article and said, I'd love to talk with you at some point about some of my observations on the distinction between power and authority, which I think really plays into some of what he's talking about here. And while my campaign was not nearly as large as Andrew Yang's, and obviously nothing like Donald Trump's or Joe Biden's or Bernie Sanders, I can absolutely attest to the fact that, and just this comes not only from my campaign, but from being a public speaker, that when you have so many people who come to hear your words and you get a lot of affirmation for the things you're saying, and you do get a lot of people who are listening and kind of paying attention to your words, it feeds your ego. And it's one of the reasons why I've worked very hard over my entire public speaking career to make sure that I stay grounded, right? When I lived on the reservation, it was so easy to stay grounded because I would travel off the reservation and go to these large conferences and seminars and workshops, and you would be the center of the attention, and people would hang on your words, and you would get interviews and things. And then you come home to the reservation and you drive on your dirt road, or you go back to your hogan with no running water, electricity, and it would be like yeah, it was very, going back to the res for those 11 years we lived there was incredibly grounding. And since we've moved into DC, which is still, it's the seat of power, right? I mean, it's the hub of so many things in not only our country, but our world. One of the things we've done to kind of ground ourselves is we live in a very, well, one of the ways I describe it is, even in the 6 years we've been in DC, it's gentrifying incredibly rapidly. And we are living in one of the neighborhoods that is not yet gentrified. And so living in the neighborhood we live in helps to ground us and helps us to just maintain a very humble attitude. Unfortunately, even the place where we're living is gentrifying quickly, and so it's changing. And one of the other things I do when I travel is I make sure, one of the greatest benefits I find of traveling and speaking in person is not sitting in the green room and hobnobbing with other well-known people, but it's talking with individuals and getting to know as many people from the audience that I can. And this is why, if I'm speaking at a conference or I'm at a campus, you will usually find me sitting in the cafeteria or sitting in the lobby of the hotel, sometimes just reading a book, but I do what I can to make myself as available as possible so I can sit and talk and have dialogue with people who are hearing me speak and who have traveled or come to hear what I've had to say. And I do that because so much of the transformation that comes doesn't come just from the presentation, but it comes from the follow-up interactions and the questions that happen kind of off of the main stage. And I find by doing that, and even by shunning some of the more prestigious places, especially at conferences where you can go and sit and hobnob with other people, I really prefer just to sit in the lobby and to talk with people and to make myself as accessible as others. And I was very grateful to see that Andrew Yang is at least aware of this and the effect that this has on you psychologically, because he obviously is continuing to strive to be a leader. And I think he has some really good ideas. And I hope he does have an opportunity to lead our nation, to be a leader in some capacity in the future. And so I'm very glad to see he's wrestling with things like this. I would love to see more people wrestle with the things that Andrew Yang has brought up in this article. And it also got me thinking a lot about kind of the implications this has on race, right? Because again, when you deal with these issues as a candidate or as a public speaker and you're put in that position, but it immediately made me think, what about, the white landowning male and this demographic of people, or the white male in the broader country, where they are constantly centered? Maybe they're not treated as famous, but they have so many of the systems around that are working for them and are for their benefit and are there to prop them up and give them opportunities and all these other things. And what does that do to you even more psychologically? And so I think there's a lot of things in this article by Andrew Yang, and I encourage people to look at it and to read it. I thought it had some very good insights. So those are just a few of the things that I'm thinking about right now. And I just wanted to make sure I talked about the event that is happening in Albuquerque. It's supposed to be next week. The dinner, I believe, is still happening on the 12th, but the other events are going to be online. And I don't have a schedule for when those will take place. The physical events were going to take place on the 13th. I have not seen if they're going to stretch the webinars out, and they have not updated the website to say what dates they'll be doing it on. So I will put that on my social media as soon as I know. But if you're able to, go ahead and you can check back on the link I shared earlier in the comments. Anyway, those are a few of my thoughts. I hope everyone has a really good day. I hope you enjoy your second cup of coffee, and maybe walk in beauty, and maybe learn how to walk in beauty together. So I can't have my relatives and hook on that.